I've never liked calling ahead to say what time I'm coming home. It's an old habit, one I carried with me since I was young. Maybe because nothing warms my heart like seeing Maggie's eyes light up when I walk through the door earlier than expected. Even after 42 years of marriage, she still runs toward me with the same joy she had when we were newlyweds. That kind of love, the easy, familiar, unwavering kind, is rare, and I've never taken it for granted. Before I tell you how everything changed, let me ask you for a small favor. Drop a comment telling me where you're watching from, and don't forget to like this video and subscribe to the channel. Your support helps keep stories like mine alive. That day, December 21st, I decided to end my rideshare shift early. Our small coastal town was quiet, winter tourists still trickling in, and I was thinking only about getting home to start preparing for Christmas with my wife. The holidays have always meant something special to us, especially now that the house is emptier. Ever since our only son, Daniel, married Vanessa, he's visited less and less. Heading home already. Well, my friend Frank asked, another driver. Good man. Reliable, honest. The kind of friend you make only after decades on the road. Yeah, I chuckled. Slipping my phone into my shirt pocket, met my quota early, and I want to surprise Maggie. Frank slapped my back with a big laugh. 40 years of marriage and still doing surprises. Keep it up. Will, that's how you stay young. I drove home in my old 2016 Nissan Versa, a car I bought after retiring from construction. My body couldn't take the lifting, climbing, and long days anymore. 62 isn't old in spirit, but it's old enough for your back to remind you daily that you're not invincible. As I drove, my mind wandered, remembering everything Maggie and I had built together. Our modest home took almost 30 years to finish. I laid the bricks myself. She washed and ironed clothes for neighbors while I worked double shifts whenever I could. We didn't have much, but we built everything with our own hands. As I turned onto our street, something immediately felt wrong. A black Honda Civic newer model was parked right in front of my house. Next to it was Daniel's truck. He wasn't supposed to come until Christmas Eve, 3 days away. I parked half a block down and walked slowly toward the house, each step tightening a knot in my stomach. Daniel never visited without calling first, and he certainly wouldn't show up with a car I didn't recognize, not unless something unusual was going on. Before I reached the steps, I heard laughter coming from inside. Loud men's laughter, women's voices, glasses clinking. But then I saw Maggie sitting alone on the small bench beside the entrance. Her shoulders were shaking, her head was bowed. My wife was crying. I moved closer without making a sound, my heart pounding like it used to when I climbed steel scaffolding 30 years ago. I crouched beside her. My love. What's wrong? I whispered. She startled, her reddened eyes widening. Well, I didn't expect you home this early. What happened? I took her cold hands into mine. Why are you crying? She hesitated, brushing at her tears, then glanced nervously toward the half-open front door where laughter poured out as if a party were happening inside our home. It's nothing. Just... Before she could finish, Daniel's voice rang from inside. Mom, come on, stop dragging this out. It's just one signature. Mr. Rick and Mrs. Linda came all the way here to help us with the paperwork. The Colemans, my son's in-laws. Paperwork, signatures. A chill spread through me like ice water. What paperwork? I asked Maggie, lowering my voice. The fear in her eyes sliced me deeper than any hammer slip I ever took on the job. They came 2 hours ago, she whispered. Dan, Vanessa, and her parents. They brought beer, made a little toast. I thought it was a holiday visit. But then, footsteps approached. I stood quickly, stepping behind the porch column. Daniel opened the door and stepped onto the porch, annoyed and impatient, so distracted he didn't notice me yet. At 35, he resembles me more than he resembles Maggie, but in his eyes, there's something I've never recognized, something that grew worse after he married into the Coleman family. Mom, you're making this difficult, he said sharply. We just need you to sign the transfer and the power of attorney. Then everything will be handled properly. The house will be safer with us. You and Dad are getting older. I stepped forward. Daniel, I said, my voice low. He spun around so fast he nearly tripped, his face drained of color. Dad, I didn't know you were home. I asked you a question. I said, what transfer? What power of attorney? Before he could answer, Vanessa appeared behind him, wearing the same polite smile she gives everyone, a smile that never once reached her eyes. "Oh, Mr. Parker," she cooed. What a lovely surprise. Then her parents stepped into view. Richard Coleman, a bulky man in tailored clothes, and his wife, Linda, her neck weighed down with heavy jewelry. "Mr. Parker," Richard said smoothly, extending his hand. "A pleasure." I didn't take it. My gaze stayed locked on my son. "Daniel, explain." He exchanged a glance with Richard. "Dad, it's nothing dramatic," he said. "We just want to secure the family's future. With your job as a driver, your age, I cut him off. This house, the one your mother and I poured 40 years into, the one I built brick by brick." Richard stepped forward with a condescending smile. "You're misinterpreting this, Mr. Parker. We simply want to help protect your assets." My hands clenched. "Our assets don't need your protection." And that was the moment everything truly began. Daniel's jaw tightened, frustration flashing in his eyes. I could tell he'd been drinking. His pupils were too bright, his stance unsteady. Before he could respond, Linda Coleman stepped forward with a soft smile meant to appear nurturing. "We only want what's best for everyone," she said sweetly. "Imagine how comforting it would be to know the house is legally in Daniel and Vanessa's names. You could continue living here peacefully, without any of the responsibilities. They'd take care of taxes, maintenance, everything. Isn't that what all parents want?" Maggie lowered her gaze again. Shame flickered across her face, and at that moment something inside me tore, not from rage, but from the realization that they had been wearing her down for hours while I wasn't home to protect her. "Nobody is signing anything," I said, "stepping between the Colemans and my wife, and I want all of you to leave my home. Now." Richard's polite expression vanished. His eyes hardened. "I think you're making a mistake. Mr. Parker, we could have handled this in a very civilized way." "I am handling it in a civilized way," I replied coldly. "By asking you to respect our decisions." Daniel took a step toward me, his voice rising. "Dad, stop. You're ruining everything. Coleman knows people. He can help us expand the property, get a loan, build something better. You're blocking our future because you can't let go." So that's what this was really about. Not family, not protection, not love. A loan, a business scheme, a chance for Daniel to climb into Richard Coleman's world without doing the work. I looked at my son long and hard. This house is not leverage for your debts. It's not collateral for your ambitions, and it damn sure isn't yours to take. The air grew thick as Daniel's face darkened. Vanessa tugged at his arm gently, trying to mask her irritation with concern. "Dan, sweetheart, let's just give them time," she said softly but stiffly. "We don't want to overwhelm us, as if we were fragile, confused, incapable." The Colemans stepped back into the house to gather their things, leaving a trail of expensive cologne and self-importance behind. Daniel lingered, his expression somewhere between anger and desperation. "Dad," he said, "we're trying to help you. If you wanted to help," I replied quietly, "you would respect us." His eyes flickered, anger giving way to something like guilt, but only for a moment. They all walked toward the vehicles. As they left, Richard paused, forcing a smile. "The offer still stands, Mr. Parker. Think it over." "I won't," I said simply. When they finally pulled away, I turned to Maggie. Her hands trembled. Her breath came in uneven waves. She looked smaller somehow, as though the past few hours had weighed on her shoulders like cement. "Did they force you? Did you sign anything?" My voice came out harsher than intended. She shook her head quickly. "No, but Will, they kept insisting. They said if something happened to you, I'd be helpless, that the government could take the house, that we'd lose everything." She covered her face with her hands, her voice cracking. For a moment, I believed them. I wrapped her in my arms. She trembled like a bird. "They will never get this house," I murmured. "I'll make sure of it." After she calmed, we walked back inside. The house smelled like beer and expensive perfume, 2 cents that didn't belong in the home Maggie and I built from nothing. On the kitchen table sat several half-finished bottles and a stack of documents. I picked them up and my chest tightened. Property transfer forms, power of attorney drafts, all printed on Coleman's preferred notary's letterhead. They had planned every detail before they even arrived. "Maggie," I said quietly, "this wasn't some visit gone wrong. This was coordinated." Her face paled. That night, while she slept restlessly beside me, I lay awake staring at the ceiling thinking, calculating, remembering every fight we had won in our lives by working together, inch by inch. I needed allies. I needed a plan. I needed to secure everything legally before Daniel and the Colemans returned with another angle of attack. Before sunrise, I slipped out of bed and brewed coffee. The bitter warmth steadied me. I called Frank. "Will you all right? It's barely 5. I need you to cover my shifts today. Something's come up. I owe you one." Frank hesitated. "Is Maggie okay?" "She will be." I answered. "After I fix this." When I hung up, I felt Maggie's familiar hand on my shoulder. She had woken silently, the way she always did when something troubled me. "Where are you going so early?" she asked. "To make sure no one ever tries to take from us again," I said, intertwining our fingers. "Trust me, sweetheart." She searched my eyes, the way she has for 42 years, her intuition sharper than anyone gives her credit for. "Be careful." "Will," she said softly. I know that look. I kissed her forehead. I'm always careful, but this time, I'm also prepared. My first stop was the municipal police station. The old one-story building was just waking up. Officers switching shifts, yawning, rubbing their eyes. Then I heard a familiar voice. Will Parker. At this hour. "What's going on?" Captain Mike Reyes. Childhood friend, now a respected cop, inside his office over a cup of lukewarm coffee. I told him everything, with each detail. His expression grew darker. "I know the Colemans." Mike finally said, "They're not strangers to bending the law for their gain. And Daniel, I'm sorry. Will, I've seen him hanging with the wrong crowd lately." My heart tightened, but I didn't look away. "Mike, I need protection for Maggie, and I need to know what steps I can take." He leaned forward. "I can't arrest them for showing up with paperwork, but I can increase patrols near your house, and will. If they show up again, call me immediately." I nodded, but I knew patrol cars wouldn't be enough. I needed legal protection, and I knew exactly who could help. I left the station feeling a little steadier, but also fully aware that patrol cars and friendly advice wouldn't stop the Colemans. People like Rick and Linda didn't back down after one failed attempt. They regrouped, they escalated, and Daniel, my own son, was caught in their orbit, spinning closer to their gravity than mine. So I drove straight to the small law office near the market district, the one with the green awning and the single flickering light above the door. Even at this early hour, the lights were on. I knocked. A woman's voice, firm but young, called out, "Come in." Jessica Carter looked nothing like the seasoned lawyers you see on television. She was in her 30s, with sharp eyes behind sleek glasses and hair neatly pulled into a bun. But the way she evaluated me, calm, focused, without a hint of intimidation, told me she had experience far beyond her years. "How can I help you?" "Mr. Parker," she asked, motioning for me to sit. I explained everything, from the moment I found Maggie crying on the porch to the forged power of attorney documents. Jessica didn't interrupt. She didn't gasp or react dramatically. She took notes quick, precise strokes of her pen, and listened as if every detail mattered. When I finished, she removed her glasses and placed them on her desk. "Mr. Parker," she said, "what you're describing is, unfortunately, very common. Elder financial coercion often comes from people close to the victims, sometimes even family." My stomach twisted. "What can I do?" "We begin by reviewing all your legal documents. Wills, deeds, any possible authorization your son or the Colemans might have gained access to." She paused. "Do you have a will? I made one about 10 years ago." I answered, "Daniel is listed as the sole heir. He's our only child. In that case, we need to make revisions immediately." The bluntness of her words cut through me, but she was right. I nodded. Jessica continued, "We also need to revoke any power of attorney that might already exist in his name. There isn't any." I said automatically, "We never gave him one." Jessica's gaze sharpened. Are you certain? Many people sign documents without understanding what they represent. Did your wife ever sign anything while distracted or pressured? A chill ran through me as I remembered how Maggie's hands shook the night before. She told me she didn't sign anything yesterday. I said slowly, but before that, I'm not sure. Jessica picked up her phone. I know every notary in town. I'll have them check their records. Meanwhile, let's draft revocations and review your estate plan for the next 2 hours. We work through documents, trust papers, amendments to our will, revocations, protections I never knew existed. Jessica explained everything patiently, making sure I understood each step. We were nearly finished when her phone rang. Lopez, she answered. Yes, go ahead. Her expression shifted from neutral to grim. I see, she said. Thank you for confirming. She hung up and looked at me. Mr. Parker, a general power of attorney was filed 6 months ago, in Daniel's name, signed by, my heart stopped, by your wife. I stared at her. That's impossible. The notary claims the signature matches, she said gently, but he admits he didn't verify her ID carefully. I felt the room tilt. Maggie would never sign something that serious without telling me, unless she thought she was signing something else. Unless someone handed her a stack of papers and slid the real one between them. Unless, could it be forged? I asked, my voice rasping. Jessica nodded thoughtfully. It's possible, and we will challenge it. But first, we revoke it. She guided me through the revocation documents, then said, Now, let's protect your home permanently. I recommend placing the house into a living trust. That way, no one, not Daniel, not the Colemans, can take it from you. I approved every document she placed before me. By noon, we had visited 2 notaries, filed revocations, formalized the trust, and updated our will to include strict disinheritance clauses for any coercion. I felt drained but fortified. As we left the last notary's office, Jessica said, One more thing. You need evidence. If they pressure you again, record everything. Your state allows one-party consent. You only need to record from your end. She took my phone, set up a hidden recording shortcut, and showed me how to activate it without being noticed. Protect yourselves, Mr. Parker, she said. These people are escalating. I thanked her and headed home, but before I even turned onto our street, my phone rang. Maggie, her voice trembled. Will, Daniel just called. He said he's coming over with Mr. Coleman. They told me they have something important to show us. I felt the air vanish from my lungs. Don't open the door. I said immediately, I'm on my way. Now. I told them Mr. Sam was here fixing the lock, she whispered. It bought us a little time, even in fear. Maggie's instincts were sharp. Sam Harris, our neighborhood locksmith, was a big man with a presence that discouraged unwanted guests. If they believed he was there, they'd be cautious. I'll be home in 10 minutes, I said. I sped through town, adrenaline blurring the storefronts and winter decorations. As I neared the house, I spotted Daniel's truck and Rick Coleman's shiny black Civic parked tightly at the curb. They were already inside. My pulse hammered. Before getting out of the car, I pressed the shortcut Jessica installed and slipped the phone into my shirt pocket. The recording was rolling. Whatever happened next, I'd have proof. I stepped out of the car quietly and approached the house from the side, staying low near the hedge. My phone vibrated with a notification from the security app Sam had installed. I opened it instantly. The front door camera showed Daniel and Rick sitting at our kitchen table, papers spread openly before them. Maggie stood near the counter, her hands clasped tightly together. She looked cornered, like a deer surrounded by wolves. I slipped to the window and peered inside. Daniel was speaking animatedly, gesturing toward the documents. Mom, this is for your own good, he insisted. If you and Dad won't take care of this willingly, we need to step in. We're just trying to protect your future. Protect. A word that tasted like poison. I didn't wait any longer. I walked up the steps, twisted the handle, and stepped inside. The room went still. Maggie turned first. Relief flooded her eyes. Will. Daniel and Rick looked like they'd been caught breaking into a bank vault. Dad, Daniel said, pushing back from the table. We weren't expecting you. I can see that. My voice was calm. Too calm. Rick adjusted his tie. recovering faster than Daniel. But Parker, good. We wanted to go over a few legal measures with you both. This is all routine. Routine, I walked forward. Placing myself beside Maggie, breaking into my home without permission is routine to you. Daniel raised his hands. We didn't break in. Mom let us in. Because you told her you had urgent news about me. I shot back. Maggie nodded silently behind me. That's manipulation. Daniel. Not concern. Rick cleared his throat, pasting on his professional smile. Look, this doesn't need to be dramatic. You and your wife are getting older, and the law can be unforgiving if assets aren't protected correctly. If you put everything under a corporation we manage, you both can live here without lifting a finger. The property will be shielded. Everyone wins. I picked up one of the papers on the table, a contract, except the language was predatory clauses that would strip us of ownership immediately, placing everything under a Coleman-managed entity. We wouldn't live peacefully. We'd be tenants in our own home. How generous, I murmured. Daniel stepped closer. Dad, please, don't make this harder. Mr. Coleman is offering me a position in his company if we finalize this. A real opportunity. There it was. The truth. What kind of opportunity, I asked. One that requires stealing from your parents. Daniel flinched as though I'd hit him. For a moment, guilt flashed in his eyes, but Rick's presence beside him snuffed it out. Dad? I'm trying to build a life. Vanessa and I. You're trying to take ours, I said quietly. Daniel's breath hitched, but Rick stepped between us like the seasoned manipulator he was. Mr. Parker, you're being emotional. Let's talk like adults. We're gonna talk, I said, the calm back in my voice, because while you've been pitching your protection plan, my wife and I spent the entire morning with an attorney. Rick froze. Daniel blinked. We've already placed our home in an irrevocable trust. I said, we revoked the power of attorney filed under my son's name, and we filed a formal complaint for possible forgery. The temperature in the room dropped. Daniel paled. Dad, what did you do? What I had to do, I said. Protect our life, protect your mother. Rick stiffened. You're overreacting. No, I replied, tapping my shirt pocket where my phone recorded every word. I'm documenting. For the first time, I saw fear flicker in Rick's eyes. We're leaving, he announced abruptly, gathering the papers with jerky movements. This conversation is obviously going nowhere. But I assure you, Mr. Parker, this isn't over. I stepped forward. Yes, Rick, it is. Daniel lingered, torn between anger and panic. Dad, you're making a huge mistake. Everything Mr. Coleman is doing is for us, for the family, for his gain. I corrected. And your downfall. Rick tugged Daniel toward the door. Vanessa wasn't with them today. Maybe she knew this wouldn't go according to plan. When the door shut behind them, silence settled heavily over the room. Maggie reached for me, her fingers trembling. Will, they had me so confused. They kept saying the government could take our house if something happened to you. They made it sound so real. I held her tightly. They preyed on your fear, I said softly. That's what people like them do. They twist love into leverage. She cried quietly into my shoulder. They're not stopping. Will, she whispered. I can feel it. I believed her. The Colemans weren't the type to accept defeat. That night, Sam Harris arrived with his toolbox. I'd called him earlier, telling him I wanted every lock in the house replaced. He didn't ask many questions, just got to work. While he unscrewed the old bolts, I explained a little of what happened. This isn't the first time I've seen it, he said, shaking his head as he worked. Families turning on each other for property. I changed locks for Mrs. De Herman last month. Her nephew tried to steal her pension twice. Maggie brought him coffee, and he showed her how to use the new security features. Then he pulled 2 small, discreet cameras from his pocket. These connect straight to your phones, he explained. If anyone comes near the doors or windows, you'll know. His kindness hit me harder than any punch from Daniel. Before leaving, Sam handed me 3 sets of keys. Keep one hidden, he said, in case someone tries to be clever. After he left, the house felt safer but heavier. 2. Maggie and I sat quietly in the dim living room, the weight of everything pressed down on us. Do you really think Daniel might try to come in again, she asked. I didn't want to answer, but after what I'd seen, after the lies he'd told her, I could no longer trust him blindly. I think, I said softly, we should be ready for anything. That night, while Maggie slept still uneasy, I replayed the entire conversation I had recorded with Daniel and Rick. I forwarded it to Jessica. Then I uploaded it to encrypted cloud storage, because men like Rick didn't break in just once. They tried again and again, until they got what they wanted, unless someone stopped them first. And this time, The next day, I forced myself to go to work as usual. Routine and income mattered now more than ever. If life had taught me anything, it was that legal battles, especially against wealthy, entitled people, drained your savings quickly, even when you were the victim. The morning passed quietly. Tourists wanted rides to the beach. A few locals needed quick errands across town. But every time my phone buzzed, I felt a jolt of dread. I checked on Maggie throughout the day, and she assured me she was fine watching TV, cooking, doing anything to keep her mind occupied. Still, I felt uneasy. As the sun started dipping, I finished my last ride and headed home, but when I turned onto our street, my heart stuttered. Two unfamiliar vehicles were parked near our house, a white Volkswagen sedan and a red Jeep. They weren't Daniel's truck or Rick's Civic. Strangers. A chill crawled up my spine. I parked far down the block and approached on foot, keeping close to the shadows. My phone buzzed again, this time with a security alert from Sam's cameras. Front door movement detected. I opened the live feed. Maggie stood just inside the doorway, thin, frightened, clutching the edge of a chair. On the other side of the door was Vanessa, pounding insistently, her voice raised. Next to her stood a woman in a gray blazer carrying a briefcase and a man with a neat beard and a stethoscope slung around his neck. They looked official. They looked legitimate. But something felt wrong. Too polished. Too rehearsed. Maggie Parker. Vanessa called through the door in a falsely sweet tone. Please open up. We have a social worker and a doctor here to evaluate you. Daniel is very worried. My stomach dropped. This wasn't just coercion anymore. This was a coordinated attack. I dialed Maggie immediately. She answered on the second ring. Will, she whispered, her voice trembling. They're here. They say they're from some agency. They say we have to let them in. Don't open the door, I said sharply. No matter what they say, do not open it. I told them I wasn't alone, she whispered. I said Sam was still here fixing the lock, even in fear. Maggie was quick. If they believed Sam big, intimidating Sam was there. They wouldn't risk forcing their way inside. Jessica is on her way, she added. I already called her. Good. Maggie was thinking clearly. I'm almost home. I told her, stay away from the door. I hung up and called Captain Reyes. Mike, I said the moment he answered, we've got a situation, a serious one. He didn't hesitate. On my way. Don't confront them alone, but I couldn't simply stand back and watch through a camera while strangers cornered my wife. I stepped out from behind the tree and marched toward the door. Vanessa noticed me first. Her smile stretched unnaturally wide, as though trying to paste on innocence. Mr. Parker. Thank goodness you're here, she chirped. We brought help. These professionals are here to evaluate your and Maggie's capacity. Daniel is so concerned. I stopped a few feet away, glaring at the woman with the briefcase. What agency are you from? I asked. She straightened her blazer. Sir, I'm Monica Blakely, a contracted social worker. We're here for a routine assessment. Routine for who I snapped. My wife didn't request anything. It's a referral. The supposed social worker answered vaguely. We're here to verify your ability to manage your affairs. And you, I turned to the man in the white coat, you a real doctor? Of course, he said, but his eyes darted nervously. Philip Rhodes, just here to assist. Show me your medical license. He froze just for a split second, but I caught it. It's in my car, he said weakly. You won't need it. A firm voice cut in. Jessica strode up the driveway, her heels clicking against the pavement like courtroom gavel strikes. Behind her, a patrol car pulled up. Captain Reyes stepping out with another officer, Vanessa's face drained of color. Jessica didn't waste a second. She pointed at Monica and the doctor. These individuals, she said crisply, are committing at least 3 crimes impersonating public officials, harassment, and unlawful attempted medical evaluation. They have no authority to be here. The so-called doctor began sweating. Jessica silenced him with a cold stare. Save it for your statement at the station. Maggie cracked the door open just enough for me to slip inside. Her hands clung to my arm. She was shaking badly. Inside the living room, I watched as officers confiscated the man's phone, which had been recording everything. Vanessa protested until Mike stepped forward, his expression like stone. "You'll all be coming with us," he said firmly. "Let's verify your credentials before you step foot on anyone else's property again." The so-called doctor caved first. "They hired me," he blurted out, pointing at Vanessa. "I'm an actor, I do commercials. They paid me to pretend to evaluate her. They gave me lines. I didn't want to shut up." Vanessa hissed. But it was too late. Jessica turned to me and Maggie. "This," she said, "is evidence of attempted elder fraud, and because they medicated a fake scenario, it's bordering on criminal conspiracy." Maggie swayed, and I wrapped an arm around her. It wasn't just a visit, not just pressure. This was a full-scale attempt to declare us incompetent so they could seize everything. But they had failed, and the battle, whether they knew it or not, had just turned in our favor. Inside the house, the tension sat thick in the air, like dust that refused to settle. Maggie leaned against me as we watched through the doorway. Captain Reyes directed his officers while Jessica spoke sharply to Vanessa, who now looked nothing like the polished, confident woman who had tried to push her way inside just minutes earlier. Her mask had cracked, and underneath was something cold, calculating, and afraid. The actor playing Dr. Rhodes kept talking, unable to stop himself once he started unraveling. "They told me it was just a family intervention," he stammered. "Said the mother was confused and I only needed to confirm it on video. That's all. Please, don't arrest me. I didn't know it was illegal." "You impersonated a licensed medical professional," Jessica said. "And you entered private property while participating in a fraud scheme. That is illegal." Vanessa glared daggers at him, but the actor shrank under her gaze. An officer opened the patrol car door and motioned at Vanessa. "Ma'am, please step inside. I'm not going anywhere," she snapped. "I'm calling my parents. They'll take care of this." Jessica folded her arms. "Oh, they'll certainly be contacted. Don't worry." Then, from the side of the driveway, another voice said quietly, "Dad Daniel." I hadn't even seen him at first. He stood near the Jeep, pale and shaking, hair messy as though he'd been pulling at it. He looked nothing like the stubborn, polished man who had marched into our home demanding signatures just days ago. He looked lost. His eyes darted between Vanessa, the officers, and then finally to me. When he saw the disappointment in my face, real, heavy, impossible to hide, something inside him broke. "Dad," he said again, his voice cracking. Please listen. I didn't know it would go this far." Jessica raised an eyebrow. "Really? Because hiring an actor to impersonate a doctor isn't something people usually stumble into." Daniel covered his face with both hands. It wasn't supposed to be this complicated. "Rick, Mr. Coleman," he kept pushing. "He said if I didn't get the house transferred, he'd make sure I never worked again. He said I owed him, that he'd ruin me." That last sentence echoed in the cold air. Maggie gasped softly. I felt her grip tighten around my arm. I stepped forward, locking eyes with my son, owed him for what Daniel swallowed hard. He paid off my debts. Dad. Thousands. Credit cards. Old loans I hid from you and Mom. He said he'd help me start fresh, but then he had conditions. He said he needed collateral, something valuable, something secure. Our home. I said flatly. Daniel nodded, tears spilling over. He said if I didn't get your signatures, he'd sue me, blacklist me, cut me off from every job he promised. He said it was nothing personal that you and Mom were old, and the house would end up with us eventually anyway. Maggie's breath hitched sharply beside me. For a moment, all I could do was stare at the son I had raised, fed, sheltered, protected, now crumbling under the weight of his own choices. "You could have come to us," I said quietly. "We would have helped you. We always would have helped you. But instead, you sided with them. You chose lies." Daniel shook his head violently. I know, Dad. And I'm sorry. I thought I could control it. Stop it before it spiraled. But Rick kept escalating. He said we needed proof you and Mom weren't capable of managing things. That's why he hired. He gestured helplessly at the actor, who winced. I never wanted Mom drugged or evaluated without permission. I didn't know how to back out. Vanessa scoffed loudly from the back seat of the patrol car. Oh, grow up. Dan, your parents should have handed the house over years ago. Rick was right, you're too soft. That's why he had to step in. Jessica let out a cold laugh. Well, Vanessa, you can explain all of this to the judge. Captain Reyes motioned for the officers. Let's go. All three of them are witnesses or suspects depending on how the investigation unfolds. As they were escorted toward the patrol cars, Daniel twisted around, calling out again, Dad, please don't let them take me. His voice was raw. I'll tell the truth. Everything. Just don't let this ruin my life. I felt something inside me splinter, a mix of heartbreak and exhaustion. What father wants to hear his grown child beg like that? I can't stop the investigation, I said slowly. But what happens next? What consequences you face that will depend on your honesty, not on me. Daniel broke then, shoulders shaking as an officer guided him into the back seat of the car next to Vanessa. She turned away from him, disgust written all over her face. The patrol cars drove off one by one, red and blue lights flashing against the winter sky. When the final door shut, Maggie collapsed into my arms with a trembling sob. Will, what did we do wrong? I held her as tightly as I could. We didn't do anything wrong, I whispered. But Daniel did, and now he has to face what he's become. Jessica stood beside us, her expression softer than usual. Mr. Parker, she said gently, this isn't over. The Colemans will feel the pressure now. And Daniel, he's at a crossroads. What we do next must be strategic. I nodded, still holding Maggie. Tell me what we need to do. First, she said, we protect you two completely. Then, we decide how much mercy your son deserves. The house felt unbearably quiet once the patrol cars disappeared down the street. The flashing lights had faded, but their shadows still clung to the walls of our living room. Maggie sat beside me on the couch, her fingers curled around mine, as if releasing me might cause the world to collapse again. Jessica laid her folder on the coffee table and sat across from us. The confidence in her posture didn't waver, but her voice softened. You both handled today better than most people would. But now we need to think clearly about what comes next. Maggie's voice trembled. Will they charge Daniel? Our own son. Jessica took a breath. He wasn't the architect of this plan, but he participated more than once. Legally, he's implicated unless you decide to take a specific route. What route? I asked. She leaned forward. You can choose to press charges against everyone, including Daniel, or you can distinguish him from the Colemans. The state will likely prosecute Rick and Linda regardless, but you two have influence over how severely Daniel gets treated. Maggie's grip tightened on my hand as she whispered, Will, he's still our boy. I swallowed hard. My throat felt raw, as though every emotion was scraping through it at once. I loved my son, but love didn't erase what he had done. He had come into our home with lies on his tongue and greed in his heart. He had watched his mother cry and still kept pushing. He had allowed strangers to pretend she was incompetent. He had stood by while his father-in-law orchestrated a scheme that could have ruined us forever. I forced myself to remain steady. What happens if we don't press charges? Daniel may still face consequences, Jessica explained, but the severity would be reduced. Formal rehabilitation programs, financial oversight, community service, no prison time. And if we do press charges, Maggie asked quietly. Jessica hesitated, choosing her words carefully. He could face jail, especially with video and audio evidence. Maggie trembled beside me. I pulled her against my shoulder. I could feel her heartbreak vibrate through her bones. We'll talk about it, I told Jessica, but not tonight. She nodded, understanding that exhaustion had finally begun to weigh on us. I'll return in the morning. Try to rest. Lock the doors. Keep your phones close. When she left, the house felt cavernous. Every room seemed to echo with hurt. Maggie and I sat together until the clock struck midnight, neither of us speaking. Eventually, she leaned her head against my shoulder. What happened to him? She whispered. To our Daniel. He wasn't raised this way. I didn't have an answer. Maybe he had always been weaker than we thought. Maybe marrying into the Coleman family uncovered something dark inside him, some hunger for shortcuts and status. Or maybe we had missed the signs. Parents often do. Maggie, I said, stroking her hair gently. We can't fix Daniel's mistakes for him, not anymore. But we can make sure no one ever hurts us like this again. She nodded slowly, wiping her tears. I know. Eventually. She drifted into an uneasy sleep. I stayed awake, watching the shadows move across the ceiling. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Daniel's face in the patrol car, broken, ashamed, too late to undo what he'd done. At dawn, I brewed coffee and sat at the kitchen table, staring at the steam rising from the mug. My phone buzzed, a message from Captain Reyes. Daniel and Vanessa are in holding until the DA interviews them. Rick and Linda Coleman are being located. Expect updates. A second message followed. I think your son wants to talk to you. Decide if you want that. I stared at the screen for a long moment before typing back, not yet. Maggie joined me a few minutes later, her hair still tousled from a restless night. She poured herself coffee and sat quietly. Will, she said finally, I want to forgive him. Someday. But I also want him to understand that love is not weakness. We didn't survive 42 years just to be treated like fools. I met her eyes. Behind the exhaustion was something stronger resolve. So what do you want to do? I asked gently. She took a breath. I want to give him a chance. One last chance. But the Colemans, they need to face everything they've done. Her voice didn't shake when she said that. I nodded. We were in agreement. When Jessica returned that morning, we explained our decision. She listened carefully, then placed her hands on the table. Then here's how we proceed, she said. You will not press charges on Daniel if he cooperates fully, testifies against the Colemans, and accepts legal oversight. If he refuses or lies, you revoke the agreement. He will face the full consequences. It was harsh, but it was fair. And Rick and Linda, I asked, her eyes hardened. We pursue everything available under the law. Before she left for the station, she paused by the door. I hope Daniel understands the gift you're giving him. Most parents wouldn't. When Maggie and I arrived later that afternoon, Captain Reyes led us to a quiet room through a glass window. I saw Daniel sitting alone at a metal table, his shoulders hunched, his face buried in his hands. He looked younger than I'd seen him in years, but he also looked utterly broken. Are you ready? Reyes asked softly. I exhaled slowly. Yes. When we stepped inside, Daniel jerked up, eyes red and swollen. Dad, Mom, his voice cracked. I'm so sorry. Maggie let out a soft cry, and I steadied her. We're here, I said, but what happens next isn't about apologies. Daniel nodded slowly. I know. Then tell us, I said, my voice low, steady, unshakable, everything. And he did. He told us about the debts, the pressure, the promises Rick made, the threats, the shame he buried until it rotted, and the moment he realized he had crossed a line he could never fully uncross. Maggie wept silently. I sat still, my heart breaking piece by piece. When he finished, he whispered, Do you think you can ever forgive me? I looked at my son for a long time. Forgiveness, I said, is earned through action, not words. He bowed his head. Then I'll earn it. And for the first time in months, maybe even years, I believed he meant it. Daniel's confession opened the door to everything that followed. Captain Reyes listened with a mix of stern professionalism and measured pity. Jessica took notes, occasionally asking him to clarify details, especially about Rick Coleman's involvement. It was painful to watch, but necessary. Every word Daniel spoke was another thread binding the Colemans to the truth. When it was over, Reyes nodded to himself. All right, he said. We'll forward this to the district attorney, Daniel. You'll be contacted for more formal statements. You cooperating helps you. Understand that? Daniel agreed without hesitation. It was as if he had finally stopped running from his mistakes, from Rick, from himself. After the questioning, Reyes stepped outside and gave us a moment alone with our son. Daniel stared at his hands, turning them over as if he didn't recognize them anymore. Mom, Dad, he murmured. I'll cooperate with the investigation. I'll tell them everything. Whatever happens to me afterward, I'll accept it. Maggie moved first. She reached across the table and touched his hand with the same tenderness she'd shown him since the day he was born. "We don't want to destroy your life," she whispered, "but we won't let you destroy ours." "Daniel." He nodded, lips trembling. "I know." I stood behind her, placing a hand on her shoulder. "Your mother and I have decided to give you a chance." I said, "One? Just one. You distance yourself from the Colemans completely. You work. You rebuild your life. You earn back trust slowly." Daniel nodded, his eyes wet. "I will. And Daniel," I added quietly, "this chance doesn't erase what you did. It just gives you a path forward." He swallowed hard. "I understand. It wasn't forgiveness, not yet. But it was the first step towards something that might one day resemble it." Jessica returned, signaling that our time was up. Daniel was escorted to temporary holding, not in handcuffs, not treated like a hardened criminal, just restrained enough to remind him that consequences still existed. As we left the station, Maggie leaned on me. A mixture of grief and relief washed over her. "Do you think he'll really change?" she asked. "I hope so," I said, "but hope alone won't guide him. His actions will." The next few weeks were a blur of legal motions, phone calls, and meetings with Jessica. The investigation into the Colemans intensified quickly. According to the evidence Daniel provided, Rick and Linda had orchestrated similar schemes before, not as bold as drugging someone or impersonating officials, but enough to raise suspicion. The DA moved fast. Charges against Rick and Linda Coleman included attempted fraud, coercion, conspiracy to commit elder exploitation, employing unlicensed individuals to impersonate professionals, falsifying or encouraging falsification of legal documents. Though we didn't press charges on Daniel, his involvement was documented. It would follow him, at least for a while, but with cooperation and Jessica's help, he avoided the harshest penalties. One morning, Jessica called with news. "Mr. Parker," she said, "the Colemans have agreed to a plea deal. No prison time, but heavy fines, mandated community service, and restrictions on their business operations. It will essentially cripple their ability to pull something like this again." Maggie exhaled shakily. "So it's over." "It's never fully over," Jessica replied, "but legally you're safe." I thanked her. It felt like the first real breath I'd taken in months. Daniel, meanwhile, kept his distance as requested. He moved into a small apartment across town and took a job at the transportation cooperative. It wasn't glamorous, but it was honest work. He called us occasionally not to ask for money or favors, but to tell us how he was doing. Therapy sessions, budgeting classes, mandatory check-ins. It was humbling, and maybe that was exactly what he needed. Maggie and I didn't rush reconciliation. We were cautious. Wounded animals don't trust hands that once hurt them, even if those hands tremble with regret. Still, over time, small bridges began to rebuild. Months later, after the court finalized the Coleman agreement, Maggie and I sat on our porch, watching the sun paint the houses in gold. Spring had arrived early, bringing a softness to the air that the winter had stolen from us. Daniel called that evening, asking if we had time to meet for coffee the next morning. Maggie looked at me uncertainly. "Do you want to go?" I asked. She hesitated, then nodded. "I think we should try." The cafe was quiet when we arrived. Daniel sat near the window, dressed neatly, hair trimmed, shoulders no longer hunched. He stood quickly when he saw us. "Mom," he said, embracing her carefully. "Dad." I nodded and we sat. The conversation was awkward at first, discussing work, weather, small daily routines, but eventually, Daniel sighed. "I know things will never be the same," he said, voice low. "I know I broke something between us, but I'm trying. I'm really trying." Maggie touched his hand. "We can see that." He swallowed. "I don't expect forgiveness. Not now. Maybe. Not ever. I just want to be better. For the first time, I believed him." We finished our coffee, and when we left the cafe, it wasn't with a dramatic hug or a movie-like reconciliation. It was quieter than that. more real. A beginning not of erasing what happened, but of moving forward with cautious hope. Weeks later, news broke that the Colemans had lost several major business contracts due to their legal restrictions. Their reputation, once polished and untouchable, had crumbled. Rick sold his office space. Linda withdrew from public appearances. Vanessa filed for divorce from Daniel shortly after he testified. She moved back in with her parents. But their empire was shrinking. As for us, our home stood stronger than ever, protected, secured, ours in every legal and moral sense. One evening, sitting on the porch swing, Maggie looked over at me with a soft smile. "You know, Will," she said, resting her head on my shoulder. "After everything, I think we're stronger than we ever realized." I wrapped an arm around her, pulling her close. "We survived," I said quietly, "and nobody will ever take what we built." The sun dipped behind the rooftops, and for the first time in a long time, peace felt possible again. Life slowly returned to something resembling normal. Not the same normal we once knew. Trust, once fractured, never fits back perfectly, but a quieter, stronger version of it. Maggie and I spent our days tending the little garden out back, repainting the porch railings, fixing the loose shutters, small repairs, steady hands. Maybe that was our way of stitching ourselves back together, too. The whispers around town eventually faded. For a while, everyone had an opinion about what happened with the Colemans. Rumors spread like wildfire in small coastal places, but in time, the noise settled. People went back to their routines, and the Colemans' name became just another disappointed exhale in casual conversation. "Did you hear what they tried? Shameful. They shrank from the community they once strutted through." Maggie and I weren't vindictive people. We didn't seek pleasure in their downfall. But knowing they were held accountable, knowing the law had drawn a clear boundary around our dignity, brought a quiet, necessary peace. One evening, as we sat together on the porch swing, watching the last light melt into a purple sky, Maggie turned to me. "Will," she said softly, "I never realized how close we came to losing everything." I squeezed her hand gently. "Not everything," I reminded her. "Not us." She smiled a sad little smile, one lined with the memories of the past few months. I think that's what terrified me the most. I leaned over and kissed her forehead. She closed her eyes the same way she had done since we were young, trusting and warm. For a moment, time felt soft again. Weeks later, Daniel asked if he could visit the house, not for paperwork, not for apologies, but simply to sit with us. Maggie baked a small batch of biscuits, nervous as if preparing for a guest of honor. When Daniel arrived, he didn't walk in like someone claiming a space that belonged to him. He stepped onto the porch as though entering sacred ground. He looked healthier, clearer, humbled. "Come in, son," Maggie said, her voice tender but cautious. He sat at the kitchen table, the same place where he once pushed forged documents toward his mother with shaking hands. But today, his hands were steady. "I've been attending counseling," he began quietly, "and financial education classes. They're making me face a lot of things I've ignored for years." We listened. "I know I don't deserve grace after what I did," he continued, "but I want to earn back whatever small piece of your trust I can, even if it takes years." Maggie's eyes filled with tears, but she blinked them back. I could almost hear her heart beating from where I sat. "Daniel," I said, keeping my voice calm, steady. "Trust isn't a gift. It's something made in small pieces, like bricks." He nodded. "Then I'll lay them down one at a time, however long it takes." We shared a quiet meal after that. Maggie talked about the garden. I talked about a stubborn old tree root I'd finally managed to pull out. Simple things, normal things. Daniel listened more than he spoke. When he left, he hugged his mother gently and shook my hand with both of his. No dramatic reconciliation, no cinematic music, just a soft beginning. And sometimes, that's all you can ask for. Months passed. Daniel visited once every couple of weeks. Short visits, honest conversation, never pushing for more than we were ready to give. He worked hard at his job, saved money, cleaned up his credit. He lived modestly, alone, learning what responsibility actually felt like. Vanessa moved away soon after the divorce. Her parents kept their distance from town, their business hobbled by legal restrictions. Last we heard, Rick Coleman had tried to start over in another state, but his reputation followed him like a stain that wouldn't wash out. Good. Some stains should stay. One breezy summer afternoon, Maggie and I sat on the front porch watching seagulls dip across the sky. The air smelled like ocean salt and lemon polish from the fresh coat of finish I'd applied to the railing. Maggie leaned her head on my shoulder. "We survived it," she whispered. "Yes," I murmured, "and we're stronger for it." She traced small circles on the back of my hand habits formed through 4 decades of marriage. "Do you ever think," she asked softly, "that maybe this needed to happen?" I thought about it. About the lies, the manipulation, the near loss of our home, the betrayal, the fear, and then about the strength we'd found, the unity, the friends who stepped up, the justice that prevailed, and a son who, broken and humbled, was learning to rebuild himself the right way. "Maybe," I said at last. "Maybe sometimes life has to break you a little before it shows you what you're made of." She smiled, eyes shining. "We're made of pretty tough stuff. We'll Parker." I kissed her hand. "Damn right we are." The sun dipped low, painting our little home, our fortress, our history in gold. The porch boards creaked gently beneath our feet. The world felt simple again. Not perfect, but safe. And as we sat there, watching the day fade into night, I realized something. The Colemans had tried to take everything from us: our trust, our dignity, our future. But in the end, all they did was remind us of the strength we had forgotten we possessed: our home, our marriage, our will to fight, our right to stand tall. That was our real legacy, not wall, not papers, not signatures, but a life built with love, sacrifice, and resilience. One no one, not even our own son, could ever take away unless we let them. If my story moved you, if you found strength or comfort in it, please subscribe to Revenge in Silence. Your support helps keep these real stories alive, stories of courage, injustice, healing, and the quiet victories that shape who we become. Thank you for watching.